Well, welcome to Morningstar Journal News. I am Matthew Detweiler. And here in the Fort Mill School District, we have had a lot of parents who've been very angry and not happy with the way Fort Mill School District has responded to the pandemic. And one of the dads actually decided to just take things in his own hands. And that dad, Peter Bick, is with us today, joining the program. Thanks for being on here, Peter. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt, for having me.
Do you just kind of want to tell us what's going on and what you're doing?
Sure. I've gone ahead and filed a lawsuit, right? A judgment, motion for a judgment against the school district. There's really no facts in dispute. We're challenging the rules that they've put in place since the pandemic. So the rules around contact tracing, the rules around quarantining, the discriminatory nature of how they're allowing children who are vaccinated to attend school, right? If they've come in close contact with someone who's, I don't even want to say sick, but someone who's tested positive. And it's really discriminatory. So, and they're not collecting any evidence. There's no evidence. The law says they have to collect, the decision to keep a child out of school has to be based on strong medical evidence. There's no evidence here being collected. It's like you are being declared guilty until you prove yourself innocent. That is a violation of due process. I can say without a doubt, like unequivocally, in January, my daughter was kept home for 5 days despite being totally healthy because she sat next to someone who tested positive. Was my child sick? No. So where was your medical evidence? Right? Required by due process to keep her home. There was no medical evidence. There was a seating chart. The irony and the funny thing is, this is why I guess you don't let government control healthcare or anything, keep it limited and restrained. I have friends who have jokingly told me stories where their kids, they'd get a call on like a Wednesday, right? And say, oh, your kid was exposed, right? And the kid's not vaccinated, doesn't wear a mask. Same situation, right? Your kid was exposed. They've got to stay home for 5 days. And they're like, well, when was the date of exposure? Well, it was last Friday. Oh, so you mean like they just stay home tomorrow and then they go back Friday? So this is on a Wednesday? So yeah, basically. So
wow.
Right? How can you selectively enforce something that inconsistently?
Right.
And it's just insane.
Right.
So
you are confronting the Fort Mill. Your lawsuit is it against the Fort Mill School District, or is it more against like the South Carolina School of Education or Education Department?
Funny you say that. It is against the school district.
Okay.
And the board. I received a reply from their attorney 2 days ago, and he was requesting that I enjoin DHEC and the Department of Education.
Really?
His argument was that they need to be co-defendants. Now, because
so instead of taking on one giant, he wants you to take on three.
Potentially might have to add DHEC and Department of Ed. Wow. And I sort of object to that for different reasons. Number one is because, like I said, it's the school that's violating their rights and enforcing it, right? And I know.
So they're trying to basically say that we're not the only ones responsible. There's more people that are responsible for it. When you're saying, no, I want to just select you. You're responsible for your actions. I want to hold you accountable for your actions. And they're saying, well, it's, we're not just us is at fault. They want to shift the blame a little bit. Is that kind of what they're trying to do?
That's exactly what they're doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're just a regular dad who's been fed up with this stuff, and you decided to just take on the Fort Mill School District yourself and file a lawsuit. And it's based on, you kind of want to share the executive legal suit ground that you're doing?
Yeah, I mean it's a deprivation of rights claim under 42 USC 1983. That's fairly commonly known as like a constitutional right violation in legal land. But we're challenging a bunch of things, right? Like it's funny, just use logic and reason. does it make sense? Like, let's not even talk about the state of emergency, right? That expired, I think, on June 7th of last year. So prior to the state of emergency, right? Kids went into school. If they were sick, nurse would call the mom. They'd come and get them, or she'd say, "They're faking it. Send it back. Send it back to class." Right. So what's different now? Like, let's not argue for now the state of emergency that existed. Right. Let's just say it's over. It was over June 7th, I think, of 2021. Why wouldn't we go back to the same way we operated before? Right.
So all the rules that they implemented under the emergency order, they still kept in place after the emergency was
have them
done.
Yep.
Okay. So and what you're saying with the executive branch is that it's not just what the schools are doing; it's how they're doing it. They're not even doing it legally. Like if a school wants to quarantine a child, they have to do it through due process. They have to do it through the legal branch. They can't just make a decision based anytime. Otherwise, I mean, that's why we have a whole system of government. We have a law.
Yeah.
And that's one of your legal grounds, right? Is that kind of that fact?
Absolutely. You know, in the legislators, DHEC can quarantine. There's a section, but DHEC can only quarantine during emergency powers.
And those powers
they
are
have to
over.
follow very, very strict guidelines. It's funny. If you read the emergency powers title, you're like, yeah, they've got a name. They've got to get a court order, right? You can't restrict someone's movement without due process. You've got to get a court order. And you've got to name the address and the person identified and what they're suspected of having and any evidence you have of them having that. So, like, why during a state of emergency would DHEC have to follow all these very strict rules? But then when we're not in a state of emergency, DHEC can just say to the school, like, oh, hey, you've got to implement all these rules. Like, it doesn't make sense. It's irrational, right? That they would be able to violate your rights and circumvent the more stringent process of attempting to respect your rights during a state of emergency. They can just circumvent that and say, well, we're not in a state of emergency, so therefore we have more power than we would have under a state of emergency. Yeah.
Wow. But what you're taking on with the Fort Mill School District is you're saying no matter what they do, you can still stand up and do the right thing and go against illegal orders if it's not legal. So awesome. So what do you think your chances are with winning this case?
The facts and the law are, I'm 99% confident in a just world, in a just system, that we would win. So it's hard to answer that question. I'd have to make an assumption, right?
That everyone is just.
That everyone's just and fair. So I think, though, everyone down in their gut, right, knows that this is wrong, right? Even people that are for it now are starting to, like, turn around and say, wait a minute.
This is enough.
This is enough. Like, this is weird, right? And it just feels weird, right? To muzzle a child, like to force them to occlude their. I mean, it's a natural biological activity. It's involuntary breathing. It's as basic as life itself. If you can't breathe, you can't live.
Yeah, and I've read an article to where the speech therapy lessons have increased dramatically since kids have to wear masks because they're way behind learning how to speak, because they can't see facial expressions. They can't see people with their lips and stuff. And also, I believe there have been studies that have shown that basically no child has died from COVID because their immune system they're strong. They don't need.
That's right.
They're fine.
Yeah, I had checked as of, I think, January. I haven't checked since then, but there hadn't been anyone under the age of 26 in York County that's died from COVID. And average age was 75. The oldest was 102. And there were, at the time, 481 confirmed deaths so far, which they conflate all the data. It's hard to compare it to the flu because it wasn't as granular, and they kind of slice the data a little differently. And I'm not minimizing those deaths at all. Like my parents they're old. Like they were hurting like for a while, right? But kids are unaffected. Right. So far we've seen, right? They're much more affected by myocarditis and the vaccine than they are of just getting COVID and developing a natural immunity. So it's unfortunate.
Yeah, that's very unfortunate. And but thank you for sharing your story today. I appreciate that. When is your first court date?
March 17th.
March 17th. Okay. Well, we'll be following up with you and following the case. So I appreciate you standing up, giving some parents some hope, and doing what we can do in America, which is take on anybody and do whatever we want under the law. So
Yes, sir.
thank you, Peter. Appreciate it.
For folks listening, I can certainly make this document and these arguments available, because I would love for other parents to get involved in this capacity. Like, trying to comply your way or beg your way out of tyranny hasn't worked well so far. So we've got to start hitting back a little bit where we can make a difference.
Thank you for watching today. Check us out on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, on Getter. You can go on Rumble and YouTube, and check out our website at morningstarjournal.com, where we share news from a biblical and prophetic perspective. God bless you, and God bless America.